Thanks, Christian. It's nice to hear another Aussie accent in the room. So yes, I am Australian, so we haven't got subtitles tonight, but I'm sure you'll be able to cope. Really delighted to be here. I'm CEO of Cred. Who's heard of Cred? Show of hands, a few people. Who's heard of Klout? We're like Klout, just more transparent. So we'll talk about that in a moment. The leaderboard, though, if you actually go to that website, lc.tlk3d, you'll see a ranking of who is influential in this room, as long as you're using the hashtag. So the person who wins the champagne will be the most influential in the room, and it's an example of real-time big data. I think the term big data is just so overused, and I'll explain why in a moment. But I went to dear old Wikipedia this afternoon to find out exactly what big data meant, and this is what they told me. Big data is a collection of data sets so large and complex it becomes difficult to process using on-hand database management tools or traditional data processing applications. Translation, it's hard. And the sort of things that are challenging you are capture, curation, storage, all that sort of stuff. I think, though, I was talking to Christian before, though, that big data has only become available in the last few years because technology has allowed us to do that. Technologies like Hadoop and Cassandra allow you to process stuff massively fast in real time. And I'll talk about how we are a big data company as well. But as an example of big data, I was talking to someone before over drinks and explaining how I've been on Twitter actually yesterday 6 years. And Twitter tells me I've tweeted about 25,000 tweets. And I think I was talking to Matt and he said, well, these loyalty companies, they know everything about you. And I said, no, Matt, they don't know everything about you. They know about you what you tell them. Where big data comes in is my 25,000 tweets over the last 6 years tell a brand so much about me. And I am dying, I'm open to any brand going through all of my tweets and making some sense of that. Because if I'm an airline or a loyalty company, I'll only tell you what you ask me. But there is so much more out there through my big data, through what I do on social networks, that can actually inform you about what products I might like. The challenge is, how do you scale my 25,000 tweets to 60 million people? That becomes really hard, and that's where I think the big data challenge comes in. Any guesses as to who might have said this? Every 2 days we create as much information as we did up to 2003. Any idea who said that? Yeah? No? This guy. You know who this guy is? Eric Schmidt. But guess when he said it? He said this back in 2010. So who knows what the figure is now? In fact, we worked out that is actually 5 exabytes of data. Anyone knows what an exabyte is? Well, again, Wikipedia came to the rescue. An exabyte is 1 with 18 zeros at the end. And so it's also 1,000 petabytes, and a petabyte is 1,000 gigabytes. That's a really big number. So what Eric was saying is every 2 days, back in 2010, so who knows what the number is now, we create that much data. So it's both an opportunity and also a problem. There is so much there, what the heck do you do with it? This guy here, anyone knows who this guy is? Nicholas Negroponte. Now, why I'm showing you him is I was in the audience in Sydney back in 2000, and he was talking on the stage about e-business. Remember e-business? In fact, companies like IBM made a name for talking about e-business. But one thing that Nicholas said was, mark my words, this is in 2000 exactly, in a few years' time, we won't be talking about e-business, we'll just be talking about business. The same, I think, is true with social media, social business, and I'm going to go out on a limb here saying big data. I think we're going to go from big data to just data because it's all going to be about data. The reason we call it big data is that, as I said, there are petabytes involved. It's very large. How do you get your hands around it? I think the opportunity is what do we do with it and how do we become smarter marketers? Now, talking to Christian before, the challenge is there's this really rich information about someone like me, about what I do. I think there are lots of lazy marketers out there. Clearly not in this room, but outside there in London, there are some lazy marketers that say, hooray, I've got another marketing channel that I can spam the heck out of Andrew. But if I tell you, or you work out that I'm not interested in your product and you don't market to me, you've actually saved some money. And there's one particular company who keeps putting things through my letterbox. I won't mention them publicly, but there's a blog post about them. Did I say Virgin Media? Oh, I did. They get away with it because they're allowed to address information to me as Dear Householder. Now, legally, I can't stop them unless I go to them directly, and they keep sending me stuff, Dear Householder. I'm so annoyed I blogged about it, and I have vowed never to use their services ever again. So they've lost me and hopefully 80 people in the room as customers. We talk about the fire hose. Now, we're very lucky at Cred. We've actually had access to the Twitter fire hose since 2008. And what that means is we have a direct technical and commercial relationship with Twitter, and we get every single public tweet in real time. And we've got to store it. And it's a bit like having a fire hose pointed at you. But as marketers, what you don't want is this to happen. You've got to do something with that fire hose. And so we actually store it and capture it and index it. And we have about 150 billion tweets that we've indexed over the last 4 years. A lot of data, and that's where we come into our own. Angela from Burberry, the CEO, really hit the nail on the head when she said, actually late last year in a Capgemini study, consumer data will be the next biggest differentiator in the next 2 years or 3 years. Whoever unlocks the reams of data and uses it strategically will win. And she is so right. And companies like Burberry are saying, we are changing our whole culture to not be a spray marketing company, to be a smart marketing company and use this data intelligently. So I think when CEOs like Angela say that, you know that they're onto something. And other companies like IBM, they're all saying, we're going to harness this data and actually make sense of it. So at People Browser, given we're a big data company, in fact, Mashable famously said that we eat big data for breakfast. We like that quote. Our dream is to find the gold in the vast amounts of that real-time data. It's all very well to have 150 billion tweets, but if you're a footwear company wanting to find out what people think about athlete's foot or running or whatever, how do you find that gold in amongst there? And again, big data is part of its problem. There is so much out there. How do you actually make sense of it? An interesting stat also is that over 1 billion people are creating data on social networks every day. So back to that petabyte, there is just so much out there, and social is really allowing consumers to produce all this. I think brands are only now realising they can start doing something with it. You know, some of our stats, we have 500 million profiles. We have 500 billion conversations that we've captured. We capture 100 or 10,000 posts a second. And if you look at our 500 million profiles and you compare it to other large data sets, Twitter has about 200 million users. Axiom, which is a well-known data mining company, have 500 million profiles, and Facebook has 1 billion. So we're kind of half of Facebook in terms of the number of profiles we have. That's amazing information, and you've got to be able to do something with that. So the challenge is, how do you visualize this? And so if you've gone to cred.com, you'll see that we've actually worked out a way to start visualizing this big data so that a marketing graduate or a marketing director who isn't a big data expert can actually say, what does this big data look like? And this is a simple example of typing in Coca-Cola into Cred and actually seeing what visually you're seeing. So you're seeing who are the top influencers, you're seeing what content is really resonating, who is retweeting this stuff the most. It's fairly basic stuff actually when you think about it, but when you start to visualize that, you go, well, this sort of content is really interesting and this content isn't. That helps inform our content strategy and where are people talking about us and those sort of things. And what we can do with things like big data, we can turn this into visual command centers where someone who wants to stare at a screen all day can actually say, where are the trends and all the data that's coming across about our brand? And we can even visualize this on a map. So we've done something here for eBay where up pops where someone's talking about the brand. There's a threshold to say you have to have a certain cred score. And are they saying positive or negative things? So imagine this, rather than looking at every single tweet that comes across about your brand, why not filter that to say, we're only interested in a certain region or a certain cred score or a certain sentiment. And when I'm seeing that, it's a bit like the security guard watching all those CCTV screens. He or she has got to look for someone who's doing something wrong rather than watching the screen all day. And how do you flag up there's something worth looking at? We also allow you to dive into our database. So you can actually log in and grab things out of Cred. You can type in keywords and bios and things like that. So we're making it easy for brands to actually mine what's in there. I want to take you back, though, to what marketing is all about and what marketing has become. So back in 2009, McKinsey looked at the traditional marketing funnel. Now, most of you would be familiar with this. It's awareness, familiarity, basically moving left to right to try and get people to buy your product because they've made a selection in their consideration set. This is back in 2009. Now, I'd like to introduce you to the consumer of the future. Her name is Madeline Grill. She's my beautiful, almost 7-year-old daughter. And this is a picture of her at Starbucks a few weekends ago playing on my iPad. And I looked across and I said, Madeline, what are you doing? She said, Daddy, I'm looking at reviews. Looking at reviews? Yeah, this game called Dream Penthouse looks really good and the reviews are fantastic. I think we should get it. I said, why are you reading reviews? Well, Mummy looks at reviews when she buys things on Amazon to see if it's any good. And I think we should get it, Daddy. So here is a 7-year-old who is reading reviews from people she's never met. Thankfully, they were very clean reviews. But this is the consumer of the future. I no longer look at ads. Madeline will probably never look at ads. she's going to look for external sources of people telling her whether something is good or bad and helping inform her purchase decision. So what McKinsey said now 3-4 years ago, which is still relevant today, is that the funnel has become a loop. It's the loyalty loop. So what they said back in their analysis was the consideration set, because there is so much choice now for consumers, they actually put fewer things in their consideration set up front because it's just too hard. Where social and big data comes in is this evaluation phase. There are so many choices, but also I want to talk to someone who's actually used or owns the product to see whether it's a good purchase or not, just as Madeline was doing. So when I come around to my buy decision, if I like the product, I then become an advocate. I'm in that loyalty loop. And for marketers and brands, that's gold because I never leave that. And you know what? I'll bring other people into the loyalty loop. So now you've got big data that's out there. You can actually see what people are doing. And if, like the Tesco Club Card idea, once they've actually bought that, you can actually find out what they're doing and what they're saying and who they're sharing things with. So social and big data is going to become the gold mine for marketers down the track. I want to share with you a personal story, and I was saying to Christian before, this iPad I have here was given to me by EE. It's free. And I'll explain to you why I got this iPad from them, because I complained on social media. Let me take you through the quick story. So I am an early adopter. I must have the latest and greatest gadget. So October 30th last year, when 4G went live on EE, I lined up outside the Kensington High Street store. There was no line. Went inside, tried to get the service. Cut a long story short, because of the blog post on this, a day later, this is what I got. No service. I'd rung them. They told me I'd got the wrong SIM card. So I tweeted, hey EE, so want to go to 4G, but have been at 0G since yesterday. Any idea what their response might have been? Well, let me put you out of your misery. Their response was, at Andrew Gould, if you tweet either Orange Helpers or T-Mobile, work it out for yourself, we'll be able to look into it for you. Had they been a social business and were using big data, they would have known that Andrew Grill is a brand new EE business customer and treated me the right way. So what did I do? After all my phone calls, I blogged and I tweeted about it. And my blog post, which was titled and still is titled, Don't Move to 4G on EE just yet, they're not ready for you. Kind of got the EE guys interested and they invited me into Paddington to talk to them, and I said, I want to meet your CEO, I'd like to share my experience with Olaf. I said, Olaf's a bit busy. He's in the board meeting next door talking about your blog post. Wow. Then what happened next was the Telegraph newspaper picked up on the story. They quite thankfully spoke about my blog post. And then I found the blog traffic from this article wasn't just geeks looking at mobile broadband. It was from banks and big organisations saying, do we put our whole customer or our whole user base on 4G or not, or do we hold off? And so I was impacting decisions, and we calculated I probably cost them about £1 million in lost revenue by people not going to 4G. I blog. If I'm lucky, I get a couple of hundred blog views a day. It just went through the roof. It's had more than 10,000 views already. Lots of social interaction. What else did we do? Then what we did, I said to EE, okay, you've got to actually get some influencers. You've got to actually give this device to some people and have them talk about it. So to their credit, there are 5 of us that actually have a device. I get free iPad and 4G for a year, and we actually, all we're asked to do is just talk about our experience. My point here, though, is had EE really been using big data, they would have known all about me. They would have probably got to me before they'd launched and put this device in my hands. They would have been saying very different things. So big data can cross over into social and influence, and that's when you actually have million-pound problems. So where we want to get to, though, with Cred is it's not just about having streams and streams of data. We want to actually help make decisions. And this cartoon really exemplifies what we're about. So I'm in traffic on my moped. I want to get through. Do I weave left or weave right? I've got to make that split-second decision, or I'm going to crash into something. So what we want to do as marketers with big data is actually allow you to make that real-time decision. So everything that's happened before, everything that's happening in real time, allow a marketer to say, right now, we need to distribute this piece of content to this person right now because that's when they're most likely to actually share it through the right channel. And talking before with Christian, our preferred channel is social. I do not ring, I tweet. And that's why E got it themselves in trouble. And the sort of things that we can do with this is just one of a number of examples is we can do a simulator. We can actually replay the last 4 years of tweets. And this is something we've built for a company where they actually want to use this as a training aid to be able to rewind the clock and see what was going on and actually use this to train staff on how to respond to social media. But one of the other uses is to actually replay what went on. So we had a real disaster with some product recall. Let's actually rewind that, go back to the millisecond when the first person was complaining and actually see what happened. So, you know, having the big data is one thing, being able to visualize it and make sense of it is another important thing. So that's a bit about big data, how we use big data. Definitely not a product pitch is what Amanda asked me not to do. Be happy to take any questions, any compliments or any criticisms, and please keep tweeting at Andrew Grill, #forward3D. Thanks very much. Anyone dare ask any questions? Any big data questions, small data questions? Nope, all out. Oh, we've got a question. Yes, sir. I think you need to use the microphone.
No, I'm good. How do you identify the banks who are looking at your website?
I use an application called Clicky, which is better than Google Analytics, and it told me that Lloyds Bank, by their IP address, was looking at it. It actually told me the name of the organisation, and I had a field day. In fact, when that went up there, Clicky shows you in real time. I had 73 people on the site at the same time looking at that article. So as a blogger, big data is important to me to know whether what I'm writing actually resonates. Yeah. It was very flattering to have that happen, yeah. Question at the back, sir.
Yeah, so just in the EE saga that happened, from the brand side, what was it that they gained from this in terms of experience? How did they move on? Obviously, they gave you the iPads.
Yeah.
From their side, they potentially trying to shut you up in terms of, you know, be a nice brand and give you this iPad and stuff. But what are they learning?
Yeah. Really good point. So just repeat the question. So what did EE hope to gain out of this? Do they want to just shut me up, buy me out? Now that's a really interesting question because I'm now an influencer. I run an influencer company. Ironically, I'm now an influencer, and it happened by accident. I didn't mean for this to happen. It was completely different from what I'm doing at Cred. I don't think they expected to shut us up, but they now have a relationship with us. And also, I've put my own brand at risk. So by telling you that I use EE on my iPad, if I come here and say EE are perfect, they never make mistakes, you would say he's been bought. Basically, they've now silenced him. In fact, the other day at a conference, there were some EE representatives talking, and what they were saying was not correct, and I tweeted about it. One, because it was wrong, but secondly, I didn't want people to think he's just a hired hand. Now, to EE's credit, they had no plan for this. They didn't expect to have an influencer program, clearly because they would have done it beforehand had they done it. They didn't know how we'd react. Luckily, it was me because I know professionally how this all works. I could have been a really nasty blogger, and what I've seen happen though, this is interesting, I've changed my whole behaviour. I've actually had people put comments on my blog about how horrible EE are. I've actually forwarded those on to the people I have a relationship at EE. I deal with their PR department, and in fact I've been told that the same people that deal with Jonathan Ross deal with us, so we are the same level as the celebrities. But what it means is they can then handle these issues and kind of bypass all the process issues. Because the issue for brands is that when you say you're online and you have a Twitter handle, you pay the Twitter tax. The Twitter tax basically says, we're now going to expose the 30 years of process issues, as EE found as well. So to answer your question, I don't think they thought they could buy our silence. In fact, all of the other advocates that have come on board have been very complimentary about the service. The issue I had, though, was a human error, that the person putting the SIM card in the box, the process was wrong. If I hadn't complained, it may have taken months to identify that, and hundreds of people would have been impacted. By me complaining through my social channel, that was fixed in 3 days. So I'm kind of glad that while we gave them a bloody nose from the experience, we actually helped fix a process issue from launch. So they should learn from that. Now, to their credit, they've now got 50 people working on social before they only had 2. So they've really learned from this. So no one got killed. The brand was tarnished slightly, but I think they've bounced back, and I'm talking about them tonight. And in fact, showed Christian how fast 4G is on EE. It's very fast. Great question. Question at the front here.
How dependent are you on the couple of big players to collect your data?
Well, I think what we've got to do is make sure we get data from everyone. So it's Twitter, it's Facebook, it's LinkedIn. The challenge for companies like ours is how mature is the API? Now, luckily, both Facebook and Twitter have very mature APIs, and it's well understood how to get that. But the new players like the Pinterest and the Instagrams, they're so busy working out how to make money that sometimes they don't think about the APIs. So whether it's Google+, I mean, I don't think you can actually post from something to Google+ at the moment. The API only works one way, and that's Google. So I think
Twitter and Facebook can
Yeah.
their product feed.
Yep.
So how dependent are you on, like, how do you handle that?
I think you need to be diversified, so you don't want to just look at one source over the other. But I think also the more people that use the data, it becomes more, the need for it to become more open is paramount. So consumers don't want to not be able to use their favourite service because they cut them off. But at the end of the day, companies like Twitter, Facebook, they have to make their own decisions and make a living. So they do what they have to do. But you're right, if you build a business on social and your raw material is delivered by someone else, you have to make sure you can access that whichever way you need to.
How do you do that?
How do we do that? Well, through commercial relationships. We have a commercial relationship with Twitter. Yeah. One more question maybe, then I want to hear from Matt. At the back, yes sir.
Yes, take a slightly sort of cynical stance on this. I mean, your 7-year-old daughter may very well read reviews. My 25-year-old son is plugged into a completely different network. Their communications are probably just as influential, but they are deliberately avoiding social media because they are sick to death of this kind of targeted marketing.
Yep.
I can only speak for my son, but his recommendations aren't for sort of, £3-4 games. They're sort of $10,000 or $20,000 pieces of equipment. He tells me that as time goes on, there's going to be more of a consumer backlash against these data markets. So, what are your thoughts?
Really good question. So to paraphrase the question, can we trust marketers to use our data properly if we're going to be data mined? And Christian and I again had this discussion. Back to me wanting my tweets to be mined, but I don't want them to be mined by a lazy marketer. I want to know what you're going to do with it. So I think the challenge is, if you're a brand and you say, hey Mr. Grill, we would like to have access to your tweets or your Facebook page, but in return this is what we're going to do and we absolutely promise this is what we're going to do. I think marketers aren't quite there yet because they see this stream of data as it's just another channel and they're not mature enough to be able to see that. The example I used was, if I gave the option of getting to 5 million people through a TV ad or 50,000 people who absolutely loved your product, what would you choose? If you're a brand manager on a bonus, you'd choose the TVC because maybe 2 million might be exposed to the ad and Nielsen will prove that. But the 50,000 who are your brand fans, that's a small number. So I think at the moment it's about reach and frequency. But